Hi, I'm Melody Carlson, and I'm the author of the In It Shining Water series. I'm here in Florence, Oregon at the beautiful Sayusala River, which is also the backdrop for this series of novels. I've always been inspired by nature, and some of my most memorable times with God have happened as I experienced the beauty and awe of His creation. For me, this river has been a place of rest and peace and healing, as it is for many characters in these novels. The peaceful nature of the river, constant and unchanging, helps me to slow down and pay attention, to be able to listen for God's voice in my own life. I hope that this study and these novels do the same for you. As you spend time and study, you hear God's voice calling you into healing and into His presence. You know, I have always loved reading Jesus' parables. The way He used stories to relay truth is refreshing and intriguing, and it helps us to understand His truth in new and different ways. Just as Jesus used parables to teach important principles, this study uses inspirational fiction to help us consider the need for forgiveness and mercy in our own lives, as well as the important role that second chances and new beginnings play in healing our relationships and our spirits. I hope that this approach helps you to see more clearly how God is working in your own heart in these upcoming weeks. I'm happy to be on this journey with you. The inspiration behind these novels was really the river. When we would drive over to the coast, we would drive along the Sayusala River, and the river was just charming to me. It was just beautiful, and it was ever-changing, and the light would constantly change on it. Sometimes the tide would be coming in, and the surface would just sparkle like diamonds in the sunlight, and we have sunny days here, not like today where it's raining all day. But then sometimes it'd just be topaz blue, and then sometimes it'd be sort of muddy green, and it was really interesting to me. And we took a couple of little tours on the river, and I heard a little bit about the Sayusala history, which is the tribe that lived along this river, you know, long ago. And this is the tribe that was greatly affected by the white men coming. They called them the moving men because the white men were always on the move. And I heard enough little bits and pieces of stories about the matriarchal society and how women would pass from generation to generation what they had, and they really didn't have much in the way of belongings. But I just took all those ingredients and just sort of started stirring them into a pot of women that came from the Sayusala tribe, and what if they did have something to hand down? What if they did inherit land? And what if they had more than just land to hand down to the next generation? And that was really how it was birthed. And I actually started writing it probably 20 years ago, and then I sort of set it aside, and then we keep coming back, and I felt like this story was calling me, is like, tell this story. And so finally I got to do it. Riversong is the first book in the trilogy, and it starts out as Anna's story. Of course, they all end up being Anna's story, but like I said, I didn't really know that. I'm the kind of writer who doesn't really outline. I let the story pull me along. But Riversong is Anna coming to grips with her life. I think she feels like she's having maybe what would be called a midlife crisis, although I don't know if they even used that terminology back in the 50s. And that's when the story starts on the 50s. She's returning to the river, and she's coming to her mother's funeral. And she's just at a place in her life where she is disillusioned and sad, and she's been attempting to raise her daughter as a single mother with her mother-in-law's interference constantly, and she's survived a really rough marriage and then was widowed young, and she's had a lot of baggage and a lot of sadness, and she comes back to the river. And I think it's like what I was saying, the river calling me, you know, when we come here, you know, we eventually ended up buying this little cabin and restoring it, but Anna was the same way, you know, it was calling her, and the healing that was promised there. Her grandmother had been sort of a natural healer, a Sayusala Indian who had returned to some of the old ways, and she'd taught those things to Anna. And so Anna had finally, when she was returning, she began to embrace the ways of healing, and one of the big factors of healing that she'd learned from her grandmother was forgiveness. And so Anna's at that place where she's coming to it, and that was the beginning of the story. The Anna character, you know, she is actually a product of the previous generations. And her grandmother, as I mentioned, Grandma Pearl, and her mother, who was denying her Sayusla heritage, was trying to live as a white woman and dressed and acted and really had turned away from the old ways because she'd been raised partly on the reservation, and they had trained them, to act white, think white, cook white, dress white, and that's what she was trying to do. Well, her mother, when they returned to the river, returned to the old ways. And so Anna's the product of this sort of confusion. She, her mother wanted her to act white, and Anna is half Caucasian and half Indian. And so she could go either way. She's had her education, but she is still holding on to those old ways when she returns to the river. And I think that's the real change point in her life, is when she accepts that she has this heritage, when she realizes that she is more than just this person who's lived sort of a fractured life for the last couple of decades, but she's got more, and so she returns to those things and finds wholeness. The river to Anna is a source of healing and wholeness and completion. And when she comes back in the 50s, and this is true to life, the river is damaged. They've been doing logging, and they've just been cutting down hundreds, thousands of trees, and they float them in the river. And the river becomes really mucky in places, and there are these great big log jams, and where you could actually walk across the logs and get across the river. And it kind of breaks her heart to see that. It's on the cusp of change, because in the next decade or so, the whole logging industry will change completely in Oregon. But she grew up on the river, and she knows that it has the capacity to heal itself, and so it's a real symbol of healing. And as she works there, restoring, her parents' homestead and bringing back the land, that she's inherited, the river starts to heal itself as well. And the river feels like a storyteller to me, and I'm a storyteller, and I feel sort of called and drawn to it, and that's probably why the second book is called River's Call, because it called to me the same way it called to Anna. The main message of this series, and I try to keep it the main message of all my books, is grace. I feel like as a writer, if I can communicate one thing and one thing only, it would be grace. And I really do believe that the heartbeat of the gospel is grace. It's mercy, it's forgiveness, and that's why Jesus came, And so in my books, no matter what they're about, whether they're for teens or children or whatever, I always try to have that be a big factor. And in this series, forgiveness and healing and redemption and grace, all those things go hand in hand. And sometimes you can't experience grace if you don't have healing, and you can't be healed if you don't have grace. So that would be the main thread. In this study, we are embarking on a journey to healing. I believe that it's impossible for any of us to pass through life without experiencing some kind of hurt or loss. We all need healing at different points in our lives and in different ways, and often the path to healing is paved in some form of forgiveness and grace. The important thing to remember is that God will lead us on this journey, and He promises to walk every step of the way with us. As we make this journey together, my hope is that you will come to know and believe with all your heart that God is good, and that you will want to know Him better than ever.